Dr. Heilige Gemara. Gufa. We are on Daf Yud Ches Amar Aleph, 5 lines from the top. Gufa. Amar Rava. Rava said, Zor she'achol min ha'oila lefnei zrika. A Yisrael that ate from a carbon oil before zrika. Chutz l'chayma, out of the chayma. Reb Shimon like a chomesh. There's 5 lav in here. There's a lav of a zor eating oila. There's a lav of a kohen even eating an oila. There's a lav of eating before the zrika. There's a lav of eating chutz li'azara. There's a lav of eating chutz l'chayma. 5 lavin according to Reb Shimon's kabbalah like a chum. Freit the Gemara. That's just the lavin from the pasuk of Laisuch Alecha b'sharecha. But there's other lavin that would apply to this very same scenario. So therefore, freit the Gemara, v'lel kenami mishum v'zor lo yoichel ki kodesh. Azor shouldn't eat kodesh kachim, which is referring to an oila. That would be another lav. Zok the Gemara, hanamili hechad l'kahanim chod. The only time the lav of zor lo yoichel kodesh applies is if the kohanim are allowed to eat from that. But hachal by the carbon oila, the kohanim nami lechazi, therefore there's no lav. Fragt Gemara, okay, but we have another lav that might be relevant. So the pasuk, understanding of the pasuk, is speaking about treifa, which has nothing to do with our discussion. But the word basada is extra. Rashi points out. It could have said uvasar treifa lo yisechelu. We learn a drasha. Once basar is out of its bounds, like an asada where there is no bounds, everything is free and unrestricted, neser that creates an iser, and that includes 2 cases. That includes eating kachim out of its bounds, out of where you're allowed to eat it, which is going to apply to our case, why there should be an extra lav. Rashi says it also applies if you shecht an animal, a mother, and the baby's leg is sticking out, that's out of bounds, it's out of its proper environment, the shechita will not work. Zokt Gemara, again, that lav does not apply here. Hanamili heichede b'fnim chazi. When do we say if you eat kachim out of bounds, there's a lav, that's if you would be allowed to eat it in bounds. But hacha by a carbon oila, the b'fnim nami lechazi, therefore there's no malchus. Okay, but we have another place where there should be a chiv malchus. V'lel kinami k'tir Abeliezer domer Abeliezer lo yoichel ki kodesh. And we learn kol shebekodesh pasul. This is referring to noiser, this lav, and we learn from here that not only noiser, which is pasul as a isur lo yoichel, but any kachim that became pasul, there'd be an isur to eat. Bakasav litain lo yisas alachilosai. Again, Dr. Gemara, hanamil heicha the kodim psuloi chazi. That's a psul similar to noiser, that before it became noiser, it was edible to the kodim, to the Yisrael. But hacha by an oila, the even kodim psuloi nami lo chazi, this lav doesn't apply. Okay, but there's another lav that might apply. V'lilki nami ke'idich to Abeliezer, the Tanya Abeliezer Omer, koshu b'kol altia, any carbon that is a mitzvah to be completely burnt, like a carbon oila, there is a law for it. If you look at the Bach in Ois Aleph, the Bach says, Loi soichal, there's an issue to eat it, litain loy sas halachilosai. So that's what we're talking about here in oila. So there's a loy sasa for it. So you're right, you would get malchus for that 6th lav as well. But for Rava mehai krokamar, what did Rava say? Rava said, according to Rabbi Shmuel, you'll get 5 malchus. Yes, Rabbi Shmuel's pasuk leads to 5 malchus with the skabel chaimers no. But it doesn't mean there aren't other psukim that will add additional malchus. Amar of Gidel, Amar Rav, Simin Kuzo. Kain shachal mechatas v'asham lefnei zrika. A kain who ate from either a chatas or a nosham before his zrika, like he gets malchus. Where's the lav? My time. The kahanim should eat these karbonis which affect the kapara, and we dashin la'achar kapara in davka asher kupa b'hem after the kapara of the zrika stam. So we're medayik. The Torah says only eat it la'achar kapara. Before kapara you're not allowed to, and that's a lav. But it's not a mafurish lav. It's a lav that we're being medayik from the essay. So it's a lav haba machlal asay lafu. That has the status of a lav you get malchus for. Mosav Rava, I'm going to prove to you that you don't get malchus for a lav haba machlal asay. And we know it from the Torah describing what behemoths you're allowed to eat. V'chol behemoth mafreses parsa v'shosha sasha shtei parasos malas gera b'behemoth oisat achelu. Daf is such an animal with two simonim you should eat. We could make a dik from there. Oisat achelu vein b'macheres achelu. So that's a lav. But if you hold that's a lav, then why did the pasuk speak out a special lav? Why did the Torah speak out the lav to eat animals that don't have these simonim? Michalal asayat hashemei. Elo, you have a chloride from here that's not true. Alav michalal asay, you don't come malchus for. We're going to have to amend what we earlier quoted from Rav Gidol, and we're going to amend it as follows. Amar Gidol Marav Zor Sha'achal Mechatas V'Ashlu Fnei is potter, not Chayiv Malchus, but rather potter of Malchus. My timer, Damar Kra V'Achlu Oisam Asher Kubor Behem, and we dash in Kol Heicha the Karinin Bei V'Achlu Oisam Asher Kubor Behem. If there's a mitzvah for Kaihanim to eat it, then Karinin Bei V'Zor Lo Yochal Kodesh. Only there do we say that it's osur for a zor to eat it. However, but if this is something that a kohen is not allowed to eat, such as chatas and osham before zrika, there is no isser of a zor lo yochel. Amar Rabbi Lazar Amar Hoshia. Rabbi Lazar said in the name of Rabbi Hoshia the same thing that we quoted from the Rabbanon of Rabbi Shimon right after our Mishnah, that Bikurim hanocha makeves ben, kriya ein makeves ben. Frag the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Eliezer hachi. Did Rabbi Eliezer say that kriya is not ma'akev? Via Amar Rabbi Eliezer Amar Hoshia hifrish bikurim koydem lachag. If someone was mafresh bikurim before Sukkot, where there's still a chi of kriya because it's still this man simcha, and Rashi tells us that the kriya has to be done when there's a samachta, when you still have the simcha of the harvest. So when you were mafresh the bikurim had on it a chiyuv of kriya. But by the time you brought the bikurim, it was after Sukkot, where you could not fulfill the chiyuv kriya that's on these bikurim, you're covered. There's no H of them, you got to let them rot. My love, what's the reasoning for this? Mishom delay matzi la mikriya leyan, because you can't do kriya. But didn't we say a moment ago, Rabbi Hoshia said you don't need kriya? If you saw the kriya in the makeves ben, amai your cover. Why did you destroy them? You don't need kriya. So tomorrow could Reb Zera, maybe worse like Reb Zera. So Amar Reb Zera taught us that the halacha is, if you have a mincha, you mix oil and flour together. You just have to put them both in the bowl. You don't have to mix them. However, once you reach over 60 esroinim of soilas, there's too much. You can't properly mix it, and therefore you cannot have such a mincha. You have to split it up into two smaller portions. But the obvious question is, if you're not mechuyev to mix it, who cares if you can't mix it? So Abzer taught us an important rule that kol royal lebila in bila makeves boy. If you could mix it, you don't have to actually mix it. You just have to be right to be mixed. But if you have a mixture that's not mixable, that is a problem. Same thing over here. Before Sukkot, you don't have to do the kriya; it'll still be good because it's royal kriya. But after Sukkot, where you cannot do the kriya anymore, there the bikurim will become possible. Rabbi Acha bar Yaakov Masni law, this same halacha of hanocha chayiv, but kriya you're not chayiv. He learned it in the name of Rabbi Asi Amar Rabbi Yochanan, and based on that, he had a steer in Rabbi Yochanan. V'kasha laid Rabbi Yochanan, and we're going to soon see he had a double steer in Rabbi Yochanan. Umi Amar Rabbi Yochanan, did Rabbi Yochanan say bikurim hanocha makeves behen and kriya ein makeves? I'm going to bring you a raya that Rabbi Yochanan holds hanocha is not makev, and I'll bring you a raya that else kriya is makev. Rabbi asked a shaila of Rabbi Yochanan the following: Bikurim may masay mutarim lakan. At what point are the bikurim mutar for the kahanim? V'amar he said, haru'uyin lekriya, if they're ruyu to make kriya on, meaning it's before Sukkot, mishakar alayim, after the kriya. So you see clearly kriya is ma'akev. V'she'ein ruyin lekriya, and if they're not royal lekriya, for instance, you're after Sukkot, misharo pnei abayis, you don't even need anacha. the moment they're brought into the Azara. So Kasha Kriya, because here he says Kriya is mandated, yet we're quoting from him Kriya is not mandated. And Kasha Hanacha Hanacha, because before he said Hanacha is Ma'akiv, and here he said merely Misha Ra Pnei Abayis. Zok the Gemara, it's not fair. Kriya Lakasha Harab Shimon Harabana. There's a machlokes tanoim, as we learned right in our Mishnah, and therefore you could say that when he said Kriya Ma'akiv, he's referring to Reb Shimon. When he said Kriya not Ma'akiv, he's referring to the Rabbanon, and the Yerech on there speaks out that Me'ikar Adin he passes Allah L'mais like Reb Shimon. So when somebody was asking him Allah L'mais, he passed like Reb Shimon. But when you start learning, he would explain it like the Rabbanon, who's the Rav. Hanoch Anam like Kasha. Harab Yudah v'Rabbanan. It's a machlokes between Rabbi Yudah and the Rabbanan whether or not Hanoch is Ma'akiv. Now we know there's a rule in Kachim that if the Torah says something once, it's a requirement, but it's not Ma'akiv. But if the Torah mentions it twice, it's a requirement that is Ma'akiv. And our whole discussion here is whether or not it says in the parasha of Bikurim Hanocha twice. Because if it says Hanocha twice, then it's Ma'akiv. If it says Hanocha once, it's not Ma'akiv. So my Rabbi Yudah the Tanya. Rabbi Yudah Aimer v'nachtoi zu tnufa. One place where it says Hanocha by Bikurim is not referring to Hanocha. It's referring to Tnufa. Are you saying it's referring to Tnufa? Maybe it means Hanocha. So if it says V'nichai, that means Hanocha. So you see clearly from Rabbi Yudah that he only learns one of the Hanachas is referring to Hanocha, the other one is referring to Tnufa. So therefore he also Hanocha is not Makir. Uman Tana, the Polygon Rabbi Yudah, who argues on Rabbi Yudah knows that both Hanachas are referring to Hanocha Mamish, and therefore Hanocha will be Makiv. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, the Tanya, V'lokach HaKoyin Atenem Yodecha. Limit ala Bikurim Shetun and Tenufa. Different Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. So you see, Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov has a different Nekar for Tenufa, and therefore both Hanocha is referring to Hanocha, and therefore it's Makiv. But now let's understand the Makar that Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov has for Tenufa. My time of Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov also Yad Yad Mishlam. We learn Exer of Yad Yad from Shlomim, which also talks about Tnufa. Ksivacha by Bikurim, V'lokach HaKoyin Atenem Yodecha, the Koyin is taking it. Ksiv by Bikurim, by Shlomim, Yodov Tiviena as Ishi Hashem, which is the Balaam taking it. Ma Kan Koyin, just like over here, it's the Koyin taking it. Aflalan Koyin, we apply that to Shlomim, the Koyin has to take it as well. But reciprocal, Malalon Bailam, just like over there, the Bailam is taking it, Afkan Bailam. So it's the coin and the Bailam. So how does the Knufa work if it's the coin and the Bailam? Haketzad, Meniach Koin Yod of Tachas Yideh, Bailam Umeinav. The Bailam is holding it, and the coin puts his hands underneath the hands of the Bailam, and they all lift up together. Beautiful. Amar Rabbi Barabba, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Bikurim Me'emesai Mechayovin Alayim. At one point, is it get its Kedushas Truma, which now makes it usher for Yisrael to eat with a chiyuv misa b'dei shemayim. Zok the Gemara mishayiru pnei habayis, when they merely come in to the Azara. Come on, who holds like that? Ki aitana the Tanya Rabbi Eliezer Aimer bikurim miktasam mechutz miktasam mepnim. If the bikurim is half in the Azara, half out of the Azara, shebechutz arein kechulin l'chol devreim, shebefnim arein kehektish l'chol devreim. Amar Rav Shesha said, Bikurim, Hanocha Makeves Ben, Kriya Ein Makeves Ben, similar to the shits we had before. Kaman Kaitana, the Tanya, Rabbi Yosy Yomer, Shloisha Dvar Mishum, Shloisha Zakenim. Rabbi Yosy was Medaik 3 different halachas from 3 different Zakenim. And let's talk about the halacha that he was Medaik from Rabbi Yishmael. And of course, we're going to be Medaik from Rabbi Yishmael, that Rabbi Yishmael holds that Hanocha is Ma'akiv, Kriya is not. Let's see what Rabbi Yishmael said. Rabbi Yishmael Yomer, I would have thought that even Bizman Hazeh, we don't have a base of Mikdash, we're still mechuyev to bring the Ma'aseh Sheni to Yerushalayim. Vidinu, but you might say not like that, because Bechor Ton Havos Mokim, Bechor, when the base of Mikdash is standing, you have to bring the Bechor Atam to the base of Mikdash, and you mark for it as a carbon, and then the Kohen needs to meet. In Ma'aseh Sheni, we know you have to bring up to Yerushalayim. So let's make a comparison. Ma bechar eino ela b'fnei habayis. Just like bechar, you only bring up when the base of Mikdash is standing, because otherwise you can't do any of the avodah that you need to do. Af Meiser Einoi Ela B'fnei Abayis. So too Meiser will not apply unless there's a Beis HaMikdash standing. So Bisman Hazeh, you would not have to bring Meiser Shein. Zok Gemara, from there you don't have a riot because Mali Bechar Shekain Ton Matan Domim Ve'imur Legabim Mizbeach. Maybe Dafka Bechar you don't have to bring up Bisman Hazeh because you can't do the avodas, but Meiser maybe you should. Zok Gemara Bikurim Yechichu. Bikurim also you don't bring up nowadays. So maybe Meiser as well. So tomorrow you don't have a right from Bikurim. Mali Bikurim Shekain Tunin Manocha. Bikurim has to be placed on the Mizbeach, but not Meiser. And we have a hekesh from Meiser to Bechor. Makish Meiser leBechor. Ma Bechor Einoi Ela Lefnei Abayis when the Beis HaMikdash is standing. Af Meiser Einoi Ela Lefnei Abayis. These are the words of Rabbi Shmuel. Zok Rabbi Yosy, it's clear from Rabbi Shmuel, when Rabbi Shmuel was trying to give an example of how Bikurim is more Chamad than Meiser, what did he say? Shekain Tunum Hanocha. He didn't say Shekain Tunum Hanocha and Kriya. So you have a Kloraya that Rabbi Shmuel holds you don't need Kriya. The Misa that you need Kriya as well, according to Rabbi Shmuel. Lifreich, what Rabbi Shmuel should have said, why you can't learn Meiser from Bikurim, is Mala Bikurim Shekain Tu'unin Kriya. V'Hanocha. Both. Amar Abashi, maybe you need Kriya, but it's not Ma'akev. Nidi Kuva Leka Mitzvah, Mi Leka, there would be a mitzvah. Frank more, but if that's the case, if there's even a mitzvah, it should have still said, V'lema Mitzvah V'lifreich. It should have said, Mala Bikurim, that there's a mitzvah to do Kriya, and there's a chiyuv to do Hanocha. So Elamai, it seems like Rabbi Shmuel holds that you don't need Kriya. Amar Ravashi, no, you really do need Kriya. You know why he didn't ask from Kriya? Given the Ika Bikurei Hager, since there's Bikurim that Hager brings, and he cannot do Kriya, he's exempt from doing Kriya. Why is he exempt from doing Kriya? Because one of the parshas, one of the things you say in the Kriya is the Boile Meimar Shanishba Hashem Labeseinu, because Baruch Hu promised this land to my forefathers. A ger can't say that for Limotzi Amar. Therefore, since a ger does not say the parsha of Bikurim, doesn't say the Kriya, Rabbi Shmuel didn't want to say Ma'ala Bikurim that you need Hanocha and Kriya, because it doesn't always need Kriya. Therefore, lepsikale. So, for the Gemara, you don't have a raya from Bikurim alone, and you don't have a raya from Bechor alone. But maybe from between the both of them, you have a matzad. V'lehadudina, v'teisa b'matzad. Why did you need a hekesh? The Gemara, you don't have a matzad either. Sai Bechor has a tzad mizbeach, you have to be zerk to dam on the mizbeach. Sai Bikurim has a tzad mizbeach because you have to place it on the mizbeach. But Meiser doesn't have a tzad mizbeach, so therefore we need a makor that Meiser does not have to be brought to the Zeh. And therefore, we brought the pasuk of the Hekesh, or Makish, Meiser to Bechor. Frankly, Makos. Let's drill down to understand why is it that the Gemara knew Poshet that by Bechor you don't bring it, yet we weren't sure about Meiser. Why are you so sure that by Bechor you're not mukliv to bring it? Makos. Ikasavar kedusha rishon the kitchel l'shaito the kitchel l'asad lavoi. Well, on Afilu Bechor Nami, you would have to bring the Bechor and be makrabit, even though you don't have a Beis HaMikdash and you don't have a Mizbeach, you could still be makrav Karbanis up there. So Ebezei, Bechor, you should also have to bring to Yerushalayim. So how could Bechor be the source to teach that Mais you don't bring up? How do you even know? Maybe Bechor you bring up. Anika Sover, Kedusha Rishon and Kitchel Ashaita V'lo Kitchel Asad Lavoi, and therefore you don't have a Beis HaMikdash to eat it in. Well, then, afilu bechor nami teboy, you should have the same shaila by bechor. What would be if you spritz the blood while the Beis HaMikdash was standing? Now the question is, do you have to bring the meat up to the Beis HaMikdash or not? Amar Avina, lo olam kasaver kitchel l'shayta v'lo kitchel l'asad lo. So right off the bat, the reason why bechor you don't bring up is because it's kitchel l'shayta v'lo l'asad lo. Maybe we should have a shaila by bechor itself, that maybe you should have to bring the meat up and eat it there in Yerushalayim. So you had the proper zrika, and therefore it's a kosher carbon. And now the question is, do you need to eat the meat? But the bechor b'bayis, before you ate the meat, the bayis was nechrav, v'adayim b'sarikayim. So we want to know, do you need to eat the meat or not? So we know that you don't eat the meat. How do we know? from a hekesh, umakshina b'sari l'damai. There's a hekesh from the basar of the bechor to the dam of the bechor. Ma damai b'mizbeach. Just like the dam has to be spritzed on the mizbeach, and if there's no mizbeach, you can't spritz the dam. Af b'sari b'mizbeach, and therefore you don't have to eat the meat up there because there's no mizbeach. Umakish ma'aser lebechar, and therefore we could be makish ma'aser to bechar. Just like bechar, you don't have to eat the meat up there because there's no kedusha there anymore. So too, by ma'aser, you don't have to take it up to Yerushalayim. Zog to Gemara. V'chidavar halamid behekesh chayzu malamid behekesh. What is the halakar that you cannot eat the basar? You know it from the hekesh adam. If you know it by dam, the halach is by kachim. If you learn something from a hekesh, you can't transmit that halacha elsewhere through a hekesh as well. So, frank Gemara v'chidavar halamid behekesh chayzu malamid behekesh. Dr. Gemara, no, because ma'aser dag and chulnu. What are we trying to learn? We're trying to learn to Meiser. Meiser is in the Chulin. So this rule does not apply. Zog to Gemara, how can you say that it doesn't apply? Hanicha lamanda amar basar lamanisli. This makes sense if this rule doesn't apply, and what determines if it's kachim or chulin? The davar hanilmad, meaning Meiser. But elamanda amar basar malamadisli. But if you hold, you go basar the malamed. So meaning you look at Bechor and not at Meiser, so now it is Kachim. So how could you learn to Meiser with a Hekesh if the whole halacha by Bechor only comes from Hekesh? Michael Neymar, Damu Basar Chadamilsi, which Aruch says, since the heter to eat basar is totally in the Zrikas Adam, we don't even need a Hekesh. We consider them one and the same, and therefore, since you cannot spritz dam anymore because there's no Mizbeach, you cannot eat a basar. And therefore, that's not a hekesh, and therefore, with a hekesh, you can teach us that Ma'aser Sheni as well. You don't have to bring up to Yerushalayim if there's no Beis Hamikdash. Okay, everyone should have a wonderful good tavach, and Mishram tomorrow we will learn Yutes Hamid Beis.